Marcus Thorne, also known in the game as Cueist, is IdentityV's newest hunter. His entire kit revolves more around active chasing and map pressure compared to chair guarding, with frankly insane movement capabilities, the ability to essentially kidnap survivors and displace them, and even having his own built-in version of Abnormal, letting him take away cipher progress. Cueist released in Season 38 with a third essence, and his arrival in the game definitely has the community talking for better or worse. If you've been hearing about Cueist gameplay, like his design, want to learn a new hunter, or just want to figure out how he works, then listen up, grab a notepad, because this guide aims to teach you everything you need to know about Cueist. In this guide, I'll be going over Cueist's kit, playstyle, and even a few builds for you to try, along with explaining a bit on how you should be trying to kite him as Survivor, to hopefully give you the upper hand in learning how to play against Cueist. Before we get into the intricacies of his kit, let's go over some of his base information. His stats are pretty bare bones due to the complex nature of his abilities. He moves at a typical 4.64 meters per second, volts in 2 seconds, has a normal and charged attack of 0.35 seconds and 1.1 seconds respectively, and has a range of 3.12 meters when normal attacking and 3.38 when charged attacking. Something to note about Cueist, and also something the community has been bullying him for, is his in-game model is very, very short. He's actually nearly the same height as the survivors. This does mean a few important things. Since his model is naturally much shorter, it can be difficult to see him over certain loops, but what also happens is his hit range ends up becoming deceptively long. His overall highest range hit isn't actually that far at all, being shorter than even Hellember, but because of the size of his model, this range can easily both catch you off guard as Survivor and give you a bit of an upper hand while playing Cueist. With his base stats out of the way, let's look at the actual behemoth that is Cueist's kit description. Strap in, cause seriously, there's a lot of information here. Let's start by looking at his first ability, Contact Point. With a recharge rate of 11 seconds and a total count of up to 8, Marcus can place and connect contact points to define a trajectory. After placing the first contact point, subsequent contact points can be connected within a set time to form a path. The trajectory can span between 4 and 35 meters. This ability really is the building block for almost everything that you can do with Cueist. Setting down these contact points lets you create these little paths, which we will go over what specifically these longer paths can do later. First, I want to explain what happens when you do this. When putting either 3 or 4 contact points down, you can make this little zone. This zone is called Closed Domain. After Marcus places the first contact point, the placement will end manually or automatically after 25 seconds. Any new contact points added afterward are not restricted by distance from each other. If there are 3 or 4 contact points on the field that do not yet form a closed domain, Marcus can connect them to create a 3-dimensional domain. After contact points are placed or once a closed domain is formed, all contact points and trajectories within this domain will disappear after 80 seconds. This seems complicated, but let's break it down. First, uncompleted contact points automatically end after 25 seconds. And when this happens, or if you manually end it, you essentially begin creating a new set of contact points which won't connect with the old completed set. Anytime you do finish the contact points, you create a closed domain inside the lines that lasts for 80 seconds. The placement of these zones are very important due to the second part of Cueist's closed domain, entropy manipulation. 6 seconds after a domain closes and every 38 seconds thereafter until it disappears, the domain scans its interior. Each scan reveals the outlines of all survivors inside and highlights the cipher machine with the highest decoding progress for 5 seconds, reducing its progress by 15%. After a cipher machine's progress is successfully reduced, a timer begins. Each cipher machine has its own 37-second timer before it can be affected again. This is where Cueist's built-in Abnormal comes in, and subsequently where we get to understand the extent of his pressure capabilities. Not only does this zone give you aura reading so you can read survivors easier, but it also will automatically reduce the progress of the highest cipher machine in its area. Important thing to note is the cooldown that happens. After being reduced, the machine goes on a 37-second cooldown. Let's break down how many times you can regress a cipher with one zone. First, when the closed domain is created, it scans after 6 seconds, reducing the progress once. The domain lasts for a total of 80 seconds, so we're down to 74. After another 37 seconds, the cipher gets further reduced, bringing us to 37 seconds. The closed domain ends too soon before it's able to scan again, so in total you're able to take away 30% decoding progress off of a cipher without needing to do anything other than place a few contact points around it. You can see how this can be really, really good, right? Overall, the counter to this is tricky. Of course, pairing accelerated decoding with a decent decoder like Lawyer, for example, this won't be that awful to deal with, since you can get up to that 15% progress faster than the cooldown. Regardless, dealing with this in matches will likely require just straight brute force from the survivor side. Now that we've gone over everything to do with his domains, let's look at the other ways Cueist can use these contact points. Using his ability Maxwell's Demon with a recharge rate of 20 seconds and a total count of 2, Within 8 meters, Marcus can select any point along the trajectory and become Maxwell's demon to travel uncontrollably along the path at an accelerated speed. During this time, he can teleport to any point on the trajectory and can be controlled for up to 30 seconds. While on this trajectory, Maxwell's demon cannot perform normal attacks or interact. He ignores physical collisions and strong control effects, but can use abilities. This is where we get a good look on Cueist's mobility. With this ability, you can genuinely get across the map faster than nearly any hunter in the game, and certainly with the most ease. You're obviously going to love using this ability to do things like find your first and preferred kite, along with catching up to survivors or even monitoring shares and ciphers easier. The cool thing about this ability is being able to use your other abilities while you're rolling. For example, if you're rolling along a closed domain, you can start another track as you're moving, and even jump to another track or completed domain. In general, the pressure you can create with this one ability is going to feel really nice. The only difficulty is understanding how to properly use it. The second very important part of this ability is called backspin. While Maxwell's demon is moving along the trajectory, it can return to Marcus and exit at any chosen point within 8 meters. However, it cannot exit the trajectory within the first 2 seconds of entering. This is where we can start to understand how easy it can sometimes be to mess up when going into ball form. Because of the way the track works, you can't just manually change direction. Meaning if you accidentally start rolling the opposite way you needed to, you can't just force yourself to spin the other way down the same track. And because of the way backspin works, you can only get off the track after the first 2 seconds of getting on it. Knowing how you can use this entire mechanic is also very important in getting really cool clips and satisfying plays. One of the things you can do is place down a contact point while on the track, jump onto it, and then return to your human form. What this does is enable some fun mind games. Since jumping to the contact point looks similar to when you get out of ball form, you can use this trick to force a pallet drop and then actually jump off the point over the pallet. The fundamentals of this trick also lets you potentially run something other than blink, since if you mind game this right, it can become as much if not more effective than using blink would be. This entire set of abilities is really cool, and while the community has been able to already figure out some cool techs with it, Cueist only just released, and I can only imagine people find more creative ways to use Cueist. Okay, last ability, I promise. It's called Qball. With a cooldown of 15 seconds, Marcus can launch the Qball onto any trajectory. It travels along the path for up to 16 seconds. If it passes near an occupied rocket chair, its kinetic energy consumption speeds up. When a moving survivor comes within range, the Qball locks onto and captures them. Within 3 seconds, Marcus can click or drag to transfer the captured survivor to a circular area around himself within a radius of 8 to 11 meters. This is Cueist's way of interfering with a survivor's kite. Basically, the entire concept to this is to place down either a contact point or a full track in a high traffic area, and as soon as a survivor either walks into or gets hit by the Qball, you can teleport them right in front of you for a free hit. A few important things to note about this is you can only trap survivors for 3 total seconds. You have to place them down somewhere within 3 seconds, or else they teleport to where the Qball is on the track. This is a really cool interaction from the survivor side, since if the Cueist is too slow, you might end up making a lot of distance. The second important thing to note is that as soon as you place a survivor down, there's a window of time for them to be able to use something like flywheel to avoid a hit. Survivors like Perfumer, Cowboy, and Norton can also all avoid hits using their abilities. This applies to pretty much any survivor that is a CC ability they can use to avoid a hit, such as Enchantress, Novelist, Batter, Forward, and Coordinator, to name a few. The last thing we need to go over about Cueist's kit before moving on is his trait Inertia. When Marcus leaves the trajectory, his physical abilities are enhanced. His interaction speed for most actions increases by 20%, his movement speed increases by 18%, and he can see the locations of nearby survivors for 6 seconds. When Marcus leaves the trajectory, the duration of inertia is extended based on the number of injured survivors. Each injured survivor increases inertia's duration by 2.5 seconds, up to 10 seconds. This is a very strong part of his kit. It can be what makes him feel so oppressive in chases. His increased speed especially is nothing to laugh at, and being able to stack interaction speed through the persona web can lead to very fast speeds. Now that we've managed to make it through Cueist's entire kit, let's look at his builds and his playstyle. As always, let's start by identifying which traits are good on him. Listen is usually a very poor pick on most hunters, this is no exception. Abnormal is absolutely not needed since he has built-in abnormal. If you want to stack it for some reason, it's not useless. Excitement, in my opinion, is actually pretty good on Cueist. He can struggle a lot with certain harassers, and if you can't get hits and chairs, you lose a lot of momentum. Patroller is honestly probably his worst pick. please don't take Patroller. Teleport isn't needed due to his already really fast movement. There are certainly better options in my opinion. Peeper actually can be viable if you want to play something more aggressive and kite. Blink is standard for most hunters, but because of the nifty contact point trick we talked about earlier, you can mimic Blink's effectiveness, so it's not mandatory. And lastly, Warp is very similar to Teleport. You really don't need it due to his already fast movement. Now that we've gone over traits, let's quickly talk about how you're going to want to play Cueist before really getting into the builds I have. One of the important things to note with Cueist is how you properly get the value out of his kit. While yes, you absolutely can chair guard decently with Cueist using the Qballs to delay saves and even combo a double hit, I can confidently say playing Cueist as a dedicated chair guarder like hunters such as Naiad, Fool's Gold, and Feaster will be incredibly ineffective and frankly unfulfilling. A good Cueist will capitalize off the insane pressure and speed his kit gives him, starting off the match by finding the weakest kite. Usually the decoder is the strongest option. Especially at first presence, Cueist can struggle a bit since he can't rely on his Qball to displace survivors. After getting your first chair, you should be immediately trying to find your next kite instead of camping chair. The only exception to this is, of course, if someone is already near enough to warrant you setting up a Qball at chair and trying to stuff the save. Either way though, you really want to stay active and constantly try and take chases. While looking for your next kite, you can also look for the cipher with the most progress and trap it with a closed domain, letting you regress its progress. If you're having to deal with a kite where someone is getting assisted, don't be afraid to hit the person assisting, especially if they're out of position. If someone like Cheerleader is giving stacks but runs too close, take that hit instead of tunnel visioning on the person who's leading the kite. If someone is trying to take a body block hit, give them it. The reason why this actually ends up working out in your favor is 1, you're able to catch up with your preferred target quickly, making it really not that big of a time waste. And also with the buff you get from Inertia, you can stack up the entire buff up to 16 seconds. 16 seconds of a 20% interaction speed boost, 18% movement speed boost, and aura reading. Granted, to get the 16-second long boost, you need to always have every survivor injured, which is difficult. Most of the time this buff will only really be around 11 seconds if you're playing fine, but still, truly, the more injuries you get, the more beneficial. The boost from Inertia also obviously helps you stay more aggressive. To help yourself in endgame, you should try and quickly identify the ciphers that are closest together and prioritize using your closed domain regression on them. The closer ciphers are to each other, the easier time you will have defending them. Thus, the easier time you'll have in endgame. Now that we've gone over Cueist's primary playstyle, let's look at a few builds I prepared. This is your first build. The traits you should run with this are either Excitement, Peeper, or Blink. Blink obviously can help you in chase, Peeper is good specifically for the speed debuffs, and Excitement is good against harassers. For final traits, we opt for Confined Space and Insolence. Confined is the most standard since oftentimes windows can really counter Cueist. Not only does he have a slower vaulting speed, but also it becomes really easy to mind game him around windows. Plus, the less places survivors can use to loop, the easier it becomes to zone using the Qball. Insolence helps you get your first presence faster, especially if you either don't have an easy kite or can't find the decoder. Building up, you can get Deteriorate, which is great since Cueist wants to stack a lot of injuries. This also means Panic is obviously really good too. Continuing up, you can get Destructiveness, which when stacked with Inertia can give you a pretty quick pallet destroying speed. We also opt for Berserker. Because of Cueist's aggressive playstyle, you want to almost always have someone on chair, which means buffs that apply when someone is chaired is generally going to be very good. Building down, we get Inertia, which gives some extra attack recovery, pairing well with both Berserker and Cueist's Inertia. We also build over into Overwhelm for even more attack recovery. Here, we get a bit of an oddball pick in my opinion. Mach is good, similar to why Berserker is good. We put some points into it for added move speed when someone is on chair. Lastly, we build over and up into Wanted Order. It's good to note here, by the way, that I believe Wanted Order is changing next season. If you want to get the current effect Wanted Order gives, it needs to be maxed. Adjusting around the different smaller perks in this web to get max Wanted Order really wouldn't be bad, especially since the effect is quite good on Cueist. This build is likely the one you want to pick if you play a really hyper-aggressive Cueist and play well enough to get games where you can end the game very, very quickly. Since you don't have detention on this web, you need to be confident and efficient in the early game so that not having detention in the end won't turn the game around in the survivor's favor. The second build is better for less confident players or just people who want to play with a bit less pressure to play perfectly. Obviously, we still want Confined. In fact, the entire top side of the Persona web is the exact same, since all the traits are very, very good on Cueist. Instead of going Insolence though, we build down into Detention, giving you a lot more safety in the endgame to tie games or even secure a win. We also still get Inertia and Overwhelm for attack recovery, but also we grab Impulsive, since it pairs well with all the traits that we have that buff our attacking. We also build over into Sadist for faster chair eliminations. If you don't have as much pressure, this can be very good for ensuring you can get at least one person out before endgame. Lastly, getting both Constrain Detention to slow down cipher progress a bit, and Announcement to get extra aura reading when your detention activates are both good picks, especially in this build. Since Cueist is a quite complicated hunter both to play as and against, I figured I'd also give a bit of tips for dealing with him from the survivor side. I feel like in some ways people might struggle with Cueist for similar reasons why people might struggle with Hullabaloo. They're both very aggressive, and against good ones, it can feel almost impossible to lose them. Thankfully, I believe Nutty's actually managed to balance Cueist perfectly. He might seem OP now, but give it time, learn how to play against him, and it will feel easier. Let's actually look at some of the tips I have though. I think the biggest number one thing I can advise with Cueist is kiting him can often feel similar to hunters like Naiad or even Fool's Gold. These two hunters thrive off of shutting down loops with either Naiad's Water or Fool's Gold's Rock. Cueist feels pretty similar. His closed domains are often used in chase to shut down high traffic spots in the loop, such as pallets and doorways. Placing the tracks here lets the Cueist place his Qball on a route that makes it easier for him to trap you. But if you keep an eye on the Cueist and watch for key moments that might signify what they'll use, such as animations and sound cues, you can know when they set up or use their abilities to shut down the loop you're either running to or are already in. With this in mind, it's crucial to not trap yourself in a loop that has a closed domain in it, since the Cueist can either use a ball to trap you or jump on and off the track to get a speed boost. In terms of kiting against him, once you notice the key patterns and cues, you'll start to really understand things. First off, you need to recognize that Cueist will always be moving, especially on tracks. You can use this to your advantage quite often, since the Cueist can't change the direction they're moving in. If they end up rolling away from you before they can jump off, you can take the opportunity to move to another loop. Baiting windows and pallets is also a very strong way to make the Cueist place themselves wrong. If you bait pallets, they might jump off the track on the wrong side of the pallet, making you safe enough to move to another one or a window. With Cueist's Qball, it can be pretty tricky to work around, but again, the primary way to avoid being outplayed by them is to simply avoid loops where domains are. Remember, the only place these Qballs can go are on the paths. If you know the path, it can't be unpredictable, which makes it a lot easier to avoid. The only tricky thing is the Cueist can make these a bit more unpredictable. If they place down a contact point, they're able to place a Qball on it and then place another contact point, letting them potentially place down a track before you can react. The only real way to counter this is to pay attention. If you're making sure you watch where the Cueist is looking, for example, it will be easier to anticipate where the Qball might go. Another important thing to remember is that you have a window of time to react after the Cueist places you down. You can use something like Flywheel to avoid getting hit, or even character-specific abilities to avoid getting hit. With this, there's also a fun strategy that calls for you to intentionally get yourself caught by the Qball. There are a few instances where this can be really valuable. If you need to wait just a few more seconds for your abilities to go off cooldown and the Qball is on track to catch you, willingly trying to go into it might give you the time you need for your Flywheel to come back up. Another instance is if you have absolutely nothing, no abilities or resources to loop with, you can intentionally get caught to potentially waste more of the hunter's time, since now they have to take a few extra seconds to place you down, which is more time for your team to potentially prime the cipher before you go down or save another teammate. I'd argue the biggest thing to note with a Qball is it will almost always 100% of the time be better to take it over avoiding it and ending up getting hit. Not only does taking it add potentially even more time to your kite, but also you might actually get placed somewhere that you'll end up favoring more, potentially near a pallet the hunter didn't see. The other thing is never use your abilities before being trapped. You almost always want to wait until after you get placed down to use them. You can't Flywheel past the ball, and you can't perfume out of it while inside. You can't escape it at all, but you can time your abilities well to avoid or tank extra hits. In terms of saving, this is actually, in my opinion, pretty straightforward. Most of, if not all the time, the Cueist will place down a Qball on or near chair to try and trap the rescuer. Because the Qball is obviously next to chair, it will run out of energy much faster than normal. Sometimes it's better to just instantly grab it and run in after while it's on cooldown. But the number one way not to do it is get hit and then run into the Qball. This obviously will let the Cueist place you down and double hit. That's pretty much all there is to rescuing. To end off this guide, I thought I'd share my personal thoughts on Cueist, where he fits in the meta right now, and his overall power level. In general, I think Cueist is frankly the closest to a perfectly balanced character release I've ever seen in this game. He's not at all underpowered, but in his current state, I also wouldn't say he's too strong. Is he complex? Yes. Will he take a bit for people to fully grasp how to play as and against him? Yes. Will people probably complain about him being too strong until it clicks for them? Yes, but that's kind of a given for literally every character in this game. Right now, I would absolutely put him in a solid A tier. The only downside to him is he's quite complex, like I've said. He's one of the hunters that you can't really just pick up and turn off your brain to play. He requires proper understanding of his kit and how people might try and outplay it to really be able to take over games. I'm really excited for this guy. I hope he isn't thrown into obscurity like Peddler kinda was, and I also really hope he's not giga nerfed like Hullabaloo. Guys, truly, I think he's perfect. I really don't think he needs drastic changes. I think we're winning. That's all for this guide. If you liked it or it helped you out, I would really appreciate if you could like this video. YouTube has this newer feature on smaller channels like mine called hyping. While it's only available currently in certain places, and I'm also not fully sure how it really works, according to YouTube, it's a system that lets you guys hype up my videos and climb a little leaderboard and hopefully get shown off to more people. That being said, if you see anything below this video that lets you hype it, I would really appreciate it if you could. These guides take so much longer to make than my normal videos, so I would greatly appreciate if you could give this video a like, hype it up, and maybe even subscribe to my channel. It's free, takes less than 5 seconds, and you can always unsubscribe later. Thank you so much for watching this video. Good luck mastering Cueist, and I will see you in the next video.